God to continue to watch over us, continue to be with us through this, out this day, and through this service. Forgive us where we fall short. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
When I put this PowerPoint together, I was kind of thinking of Granny Dixon when when she was with us and I do the PowerPoint. She liked it because it was a little bit hard of hearing. I think that's kind of a Dixon thing sometimes, but she liked it the way that I did it, so I kind of did the way that she wanted it done. Where a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is actually on the PowerPoint. So if you have trouble, hearing what I'm saying, then you can kind of read about it. So the book of Proverbs is a book in the third section called the Caudill, or the writings of the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible, traditionally ascribed to Solomon and some of his students. And the title of this book in the Hebrew Bible is the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. And the Greek Septuagint calls it the Proverbs of Solomon, and the Latin Vulgate named it the book of Proverbs. Now, Proverbs is not merely an anthology, but it's kind of a collection of collections, and it relating to a pattern of life that's lasted more than a millennium. These things were accumulated over a lot of years. And it's an example of biblical wisdom literature and raises questions about values, moral behavior, the meaning of human life, the right conduct in its theological foundation, that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And I think that's kind of one of the themes of this particular book. Now, Proverbs is divided into sections. The initial invitation to acquire wisdom in another section is focused mainly on contrasting the wise and the foolish, and the third being moral discourses on a lot of various topics. And if we look at the breakdown of the book, chapters 1 through 9 are Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Chapter 10 to chapter 22, verse 16 are Proverbs from Solomon. Chapter 22, 17 through chapter 24, 22 are the sayings of the wise. And in chapter 24 to 34, these are also some sayings of the wise. And then in chapters 25 through 29, these other Proverbs of Solomon that official King Hezekiah of Judah had copied. And then Proverbs 30 is the words of Agar, and Proverbs 31 through verses 1 through 9 are the words of King Limerick of Messa, which is his things that his mother had taught him. And then finishing up the book is the ideal wise woman, also called the woman of substance. So Proverbs is translated of the Hebrew word masha, but masha has a wider range of meaning than the short, catchy saying that's kind of implied in the English word. And thus roughly half of the book is made of sayings of this type, while the other half consists of longer poetic units in various types. Now, these include instructions formulated as advice from a teacher or parent addressed to a student or child, and it's a dramatic personification of both wisdom and folly, and the words of the wise saying, which are longer in the Solomonic sayings, but shorter more than the verse than the instructions. So we know that Solomon reigned from about 971 to 931 BC, and that Hezekiah reigned from 715 to 686 BC. Now, we don't know exactly when Agar and Lemuel actually lived. There's no real record of that. And the earliest book of Proverbs could have been in its final form in Hezekiah's day, but it may have reached this stage later than that, because we really don't have any way of telling when this actually happened. And the contents of the book could have been in existence in Solomon's time, though not assembled in the collection as we know as the book of Proverbs. One of the ways that, from what I have studied and some of the things I've seen, Solomon had a lot of these things written down, possibly on scrolls, and kept them in like a library where people could go in and make a reference. Now, if I can get this to work, I've got an interesting little 8-minute video that I found on the internet that I think will give us a real good overview, and it has some really good thoughts on the book of Solomon itself. So let me see if I can get this thing to work. Hope you can hear it.
The book of Proverbs. The word Proverbs typically refers to a short, clever saying that offers some kind of wisdom, and this book has a lot of them. But they're almost all in the center section of the book, chapters 10 to 29. But there is way more going on in the book of Proverbs, especially at the beginning, chapters 1 through 9, and the conclusion, chapters 30 and 31. The book's been designed with an introduction, chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. And it first of all links this book to King Solomon. Now remember the story in 1 Kings chapter 3. Solomon had asked God for wisdom to lead Israel well. And so Solomon became known as the wisest man in the ancient world. And we're told in 1 Kings chapter 4 that he wrote thousands of proverbs and poems and collected knowledge about plants and animals. So Solomon was like a fountainhead of Israel's wisdom and literature. So while not all the material in this book is about him personally, he is where Israel's wisdom tradition began. The introduction says that by reading this book, you too can gain wisdom. Now wisdom for most of us means knowledge, but the Hebrew word chokhmah means much more than just mental activity. It refers to action also. So think skill or applied knowledge. This is why back in the book of Exodus, chapter 31, it was artists and craftsmen in Israel who were said to have chokhmah. So the purpose of this book is to help you develop a set of practical skills for living well in God's world. And this gets linked with another key idea in the introduction, the fear of the Lord. The fear here is not about terror. It's about a healthy sense of reverence and awe for God and about my place in the universe. It's a moral mindset. It recognizes I am not God, and that
We know that Solomon reigned from about 971 to 930.
Rather, I need to humble myself before God and embrace God's definition of right and wrong, even when that's inconvenient. Now, this introduction leads us into the first main section of the book, chapters 1 through 9, which also doesn't contain short proverbs. Rather, what we find here are 10 speeches from the father to the son about how the son should listen to wisdom and cultivate the fear of the Lord and live accordingly, which means a life of virtue and integrity and generosity, all of which lead to success and peace. The father warns his son also about apply wisdom and the fear of the Lord to every life topic you can imagine. Family, work, neighborhood, friendship, sex, marriage, money, anger, forgiveness, alcohol, debt, everything. And these are all filtered through the value system of Proverbs 1 through 9. Now these Proverbs, they're all pretty short, they're easy to memorize, and actually this section of the book is meant to become a reference work that you return to time and time again throughout the years, which raises some important issues in learning how to read these Proverbs. First of all, Proverbs are by nature about probability. If you fear the Lord and you make wise, good choices, things will likely go well for you. And if you don't fear the Lord, you're foolish, your life will likely not go so well. Now, that is all often true, but not always. Which leads to the next point. That Proverbs are not promises. They're not formulas for success. So, some Proverbs, for example. The fear of the Lord prolongs your life, but the years of the wicked are cut short. Or, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't turn from it. So yes, fearing God, being a moral person, will most likely lead to a better and longer life, and raising your kids in a stable, loving home does set them up well, but there are no guarantees. Lots of things can and often do go wrong in our world. And so lastly, Proverbs by nature focus on the general rule, but not the exceptions, which are many. And the wisdom books actually aren't ignorant of that. The exceptions are what the other wisdom books, Job and Ecclesiastes, are all about. And together, these acknowledge that life is too complex for simple formulas, which is why we need all of the wisdom books together to get the bigger picture. This all leads to the final section of the book, two large collections of poems. First, poems from a man named Caudill, who begins by acknowledging his own ignorance and folly and his great need for God's wisdom. And then Caudill discovers that divine wisdom has been given to him in the scriptures, which teach him how to live well. And so Caudill is put before us as like a model reader of the book of Proverbs, somebody who's always open to hearing God's wisdom through the scriptures. The final poems are connected to a man named Lemuel. He's a non-Israelite king. And he passes on the wisdom that was given to him by his mom. It's guidance for being a wise and just leader. And then the final poem is an acrostic or an alphabet poem, where each line begins with a new letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And the entire poem is about the woman of noble character. It depicts a woman who lives according to the wisdom of Proverbs and stands like a model of someone who takes God's wisdom and then translates it into practical decisions in everyday life, at work or at home, in her family and in her community. So the book opened with words from a father to a son about listening to Lady Wisdom. And so now the book closes by offering the words of a mother to her son about a woman who lives wisely. The book of Proverbs is for every person in every season of life. It's a guide for living wisely and well in God's good world. And that's what the book of Proverbs is all about.
So I think that's a pretty good overview of what we're going to study in the next probably year, maybe. Probably won't take that long to get through this. So anyway, start a little bit with the introduction, chapter 1, verses 1 through 7. Now these verses set forth the title and the purpose and the thesis of the book of Proverbs. And far from being a hodgepodge of miscellaneous sayings, the book actually gives evidence of careful organization in this opening segment. So let's look at verse 1. It said, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Now verse 1 gives us the name of the author to whom the Proverbs are attributed. And we can go back to 1 Kings 4, verses 30 through 32, and see that Solomon was a wise man. It says, and Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezraite, than Herman or Caudill, and Dara, the son of Mahol. And his fame was in all nations around about. And he spake 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Now we see here that whether any of them are contained in this book, we really can't say, but I think it's pretty certain that they weren't all in there, even if some of them were. However, here are as many as such as God thought it fit to be preserved for instruction for future ages. And I think we can agree that every book that's in the Old Testament and the New Testament, we see God's providence, and God gives us a thing that He thinks that we need to have to worship Him and to be good followers or Christians in His sight. In our case, so he was a son of a wise father and king over a wise and understanding people, and these titles are added for future commendation of the book. So let's look at the first 6 verses here, and this kind of outlines the objectives that we're going to see here in the book of Proverbs. Starting with verse 2, it says, to know wisdom and instruction, to discern the words of understanding, to receive instruction in wise dealings, in righteousness and just and equality, to produce the simple, to the young man's knowledge and discernment, that the wise man may hear and increase in learning, and that the man of understanding may attain unto sound counsels, to understand a proverb and a figure, the word of the wise and their dark sayings. So the book of Proverbs has 2 purposes: to give moral skillfulness and to give mental discernment. So the first purpose is to develop in Proverbs is verses 1 through 3, and then after a parenthetical exhortation in verse 5, the second purpose is developed in verse 6. And the word wise and wisdom occurs 125 times in the book of Proverbs. And in this wisdom, the Apostle Paul commanded Christians to walk in. We can read that in Ephesians 5 and verse 15. So wisdom is God's fixed order for life, and an order opposed to chaos and death. And wisdom cannot be defined simplistically as the practical application of knowledge. Instead, wisdom must be thought of as a broad theological concept denoting a fixed and righteous order to which the wise man submits. So it isn't simply to be educated and have knowledge. It as important as education is. You have to work these things. You have to work these things together. So we also need wisdom, which is the ability to use the knowledge. You can have all the knowledge in the world that is out there, but if you don't know how to use it, or you use it improperly, then it's not worth a whole lot. And one of the things that when I used to teach paramedic class, I would tell young paramedics, I'd say, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you need to do it. And that kind of goes back to a little bit of wisdom there. When you're given medications that can stop people's heart, sometimes you think, well, is it really necessary that I do this just because you have the ability to do it? And as you get older, sometimes you get wisdom pounded into your head by doing something stupid and learning the effects of what you did. You think, the next time I'm not going to do that. And there's where the wisdom comes in. You got the knowledge, but you got to have the wisdom. So wise men and women have the competence to grasp the meaning of a situation and understand what to do and how to do it in the right way and at the right time. And I think that's really important. Doing things the right way and doing things at the right time. So the pages of history are filled with the names of brilliant and gifted people who are smart enough to become rich and famous, but not wise enough to make a successful and satisfying life. You think about that a little bit. There's people out there, they got millions and millions of dollars, and their life is a failure. Just having brilliance and having money and things like that are really just not enough. You've got to have the wisdom on how to use it. So when a man knows the right and does the right, then he's considered to be a wise man. Now, verses 2 through 4 set forth 4 objectives. God gave us these proverbs to impart an immense acquaintance with wisdom and discipline. And this is what's kind of in part A of verse 2. And to impart that understanding of wisdom sayings. And then he also wanted to impart moral insight and to identify intended recipients of the wisdom. Now, a wise man will hear. So with great attention and hearken to the proverbs and to the wise sayings herein delivered. For here is many sayings entertaining to men of years and wisdom, as well as instructive to young men and simple ones. So, we're talking here about somebody who's been there, done that, talking to somebody who's getting ready to go there. And I remember I read a book one time about Woody Hayes. Of course, Woody Hayes was a famous football coach at Ohio State. And, like he kind of had yogi-isms, there was kind of Woody-isms too. And very interesting man. I got to meet him one time when Coach Elwood brought him to Marshall. And it was more interesting to listen to him talk about life than it was to listen to him talk about football. And he was relating a story about some young guy that came in, like maybe he's a sophomore, maybe a junior, something like that, and he was going to do something, and Woody looked at him and says, "Look, son," he says, "you're making a mistake." He says, "I've been 16 before, but you've never been 54. So, there's a certain thing to, listening to people who have been there and done that. And I know over the years, I'll admit I've done a lot of stupid things, and people have told me, well, you shouldn't do that, but I did it anyway. Okay, and as you get older, it the wisdom, sometimes kind of gets beat into your head. So also, by doing this, we'll increase learning or add to his stock of learning. As the Tegum said, we'll add to knowledge. So we take this knowledge that we've got, we mix it with a little bit of wisdom, and we're going to probably be a pretty successful person. So this shows the excellency of the book and the extensive usefulness that this book has. So a wise man will get knowledge where fools cannot, and increase learning where others can get none. And and I think everybody will agree that you can't stop learning. You always have to go through and try to learn new things. And I think about this a lot more now since I've been kind of thinking about retiring. And I don't want to sit around and just let my mind go to waste. And there's a lot of people that do that. They just say, well, I'm retired. That's it. I'm not doing anything else. You got to keep learning. You got to get out there and learn things. And one of the things that's helped me is teaching classes. I'm teaching a fire class out at Wayne. Well, if I taught those kids out at Wayne the stuff that I learned 45 years ago, they're not going to be very good firemen, because things have changed in 45 years. And even though the fire service is 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress, there has been some progress that's been made out there. So you've got to keep up with what's going on, and then once you've got that knowledge, you've got to learn how to apply it in modern day things, because you all think about through your lifetime how much the world has changed while you've been alive, and how you have to adapt to it, and the wisdom that you have obtained in all the years helps you adapt to that that situation.
Well, we've heard you tell the story before of Raymond Browning was still doing the crossword puzzle and the jungle and the Herald Dispatch at 92 every day.
Right. And he was a walking encyclopedia of the Bible, but he was always studying, and that's a good example of a wise man to keep studying and try to keep up on what the best thing is. So a man of a spiritual understanding arrives to the knowledge of the wise counsels of God. God's sayings are never going to run us astray. And if we do what the Bible says, we follow the examples of the Old Testament, then it's sure in my mind that we're going to end up in heaven with God for, you know, for following the things. We'll be a good faithful Christian.
You know what, in your little video there a while ago where it said, even if you do all the instructions,
Right,
there's no guarantees.
right,
You know, and Solomon, no doubt, taught his children. Rehoboam and Jeroboam probably heard these things from their youth up.
right,
And look what happens there. You know, there's no guarantees.
right,
And they probably knew these from the backwards.
right. But you know, and on the other hand though, Solomon though had a clear conscience because he had done what he was supposed to do. And you know, we don't have any control over our kids. You know, but if, you know, the sad thing would be there was something we could have done and we didn't do it. And our kids turned out that way. So I mean, you know, that's a real good point. All right. A man that thoroughly understands the things contained in this book is fit to be a counselor of others in things human and divine and in things of moral, civil, and spiritual. So if you understand the things, you apply these things to your life, you're doing these things, then that's going to qualify you to speak on the subject to other people. It kind of goes back to the age-old thing, and Jesus was the perfect example of this, is leading by example. You study, you get your moral compass straightened out. You get on the path. You practice what you preach, and you're going to have the moral standing and the respect of others, so that they will listen to the things that you tell the people. Whether they do it or not is another thing, but they're going to listen to what you say simply because of your character and the example that you're setting. So a wise and understanding man, by hearkening and attending to what is here delivered, will not only attain wise counsel, but to the understanding of the proverbial sayings. So the word of the wise and their dark sayings, the words and the doctrines, not the wise philosophers and sages of the heathen world, but the men truly wise and good, especially of the wise, inspired writers of the Scripture. We want to look at the things that God is telling us, not the things that that man is telling us. And that's not to say that there's not some people who are not members of the church that don't have sound advice on things. Okay? But what you've got to do is you've got to take the advice that they're giving you, and you've got to compare it with what the Scriptures say to see if that's a worthy thing to do. So the book of Proverbs was not intended to be read as an exhaustive book of right actions, but as a selective example of godly wisdom. Comments about those verses? All right, let's move on to verse 7. The fear of Jehovah is the beginning of knowledge, but the foolish despise wisdom and instruction. So this verse enjoys pretty much universal recognition as the key statement, not only in Proverbs, but all the wisdom literature in the Bible. And if you look at the writings, there's a theme all the way through that about the fear of God, and like the video said, it's not fear as in terrible. The fear is more of a respect and a reverence for the things that God tells us and the being that God is. Now, some people think of it as a motto of the book, and others the foundational principle, and others the major premise or something similar to that of the whole book here. And I think that we see that theme all the way through the book of Proverbs. So the verse contains a positive statement followed by a negative corollary. And we're going to see this a lot in Proverbs. It's going to tell us one thing and say, do this, but don't do that. That's your positive statement followed by a negative corollary. So the fear of the Lord is listed at least 18 times in the book of Proverbs. And fear includes not only a correct way of thinking about God, but a correct relationship with Yahweh. What our relationship is supposed to be with God, and how we interact with the things that God tells us to do. And it's an effectiveness reverence that results in humbly bowing to the Father's will. Notice the word there, it's affectionate. We love God, and because we love God, we have reverence for God, and we are going to, humbly submit ourselves to what God's will is. And that is a theme that follows not only through the Old Testament, but it comes right into the New Testament also. That's a time-honored thing. It is desired not to sin against him because his wrath is so awful and his love is so awesome. So, we see here we have a loving God, but we also have a God of wrath against things that he hates. And, one of the things that God hates is sin. And he's not going to tolerate it. And, he's just to forgive us when we do wrong, and that shows the love. But on the other hand, if you're sinning, God's not going to let you by with it, because sin is one of the things that he hates. So the fear of the Lord is the controlling principle and the foundation on which one must build a life of wisdom. And the teachings that follow, there is advice for many situations a king would encounter and have to deal with effectively. But a lot of these situations are not only something that the king has to deal with. It's everyday things that we have to deal with. Everybody. People say, "Well, I'm really not a leader." You know what? If you got kids and you're a parent, you're a leader. Okay? Everybody has the opportunity, no matter how lowly they're stationed in life, they have the opportunity to be a leader. And when you're the leader, you've got the same responsibilities as somebody who's the king. Because the king is a leader, the governor's a leader, the mayor's a leader. Everybody, if you come down, you're a leader at some point. So these things can work good for everybody. So these matters include the administration of justice, leadership, behavior, as well as urban and agricultural concerns. So this is an all-encompassing book that we're getting ready to study here. Consequently, there seems to be no reason to take references to my son as anything other than what they would appear at face value. It could be my daughter. It could be my son. It's somebody who is older and wiser to somebody who is younger and inexperienced. Comments about that verse? Let's go on to verse 8 and 9. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother, for they shall be a chaplet of grace unto your head, and chains about thy neck. So in parts of the ancient world, the mother shared the duty of instructing the son with the father. There was an equal relationship there, just like there should be today, an equal relationship between the father and the mother as far as bringing up the children. And they really need to kind of speak with one accord, because you know what kids have a tendency to do? Well, Dad will let me do that, so I'm going to go ask Dad. Okay? Well, Mom will let me do that, so I'm going to go ask Mom. Even though Dad don't want me to do it, Mom's going to let me do it. Okay? That's where, you have to have that unification there. So here the father and mother are placed on exactly the same footing as teachers of their children. And the phraseology of these sentences corresponds almost exactly to their Egyptian counterparts, and throws into the greater relief one feature which is entirely unique in them, and that's the mention of the mother. In the ancient world, women kind of had a lower station in life, and that was just the way things were. But in this case, in the home, there needs to be an equal relationship. And it's difficult to avoid the conclusion that this feature is an example of the adoption of the Egyptian tradition to the particular situation in which the Israelite instructions were composed. And there are things that other people do that they might be heathens, okay? But sometimes even heathens do good things that are worth copying. And one of the things that when I'm teaching a fire officer class, that I tell my students is, every leader that you work for, you pick out one good thing that they do and one bad thing that they do. And you emulate the good thing that they do, and the bad thing, you remember how you didn't like it, and you don't want to do that to somebody else. So, there's situations there where, you have to, you have to have that situation, and the mother and the father, they kind of have unique views, and this is something that was a little foreign to some of these people at that time, but the wisdom is right there. A domestic situation in which the father and mother together share the responsibility for educating the child. The instructions and the laws of the parents being attended unto and obeyed by the children render them more lovely and admirable than any beautiful ornament which can be put on their heads. And that's what he's saying here. They're going to be a beautiful person, and that beautiful person is going to be a whole lot better than any kind of clothes that they wear, any kind of jewelry, things along that line. The inner person is more beautiful than the outward appearance. So wisdom is valuable. And this verse compares the wisdom of the parents to jewelry, which is often expensive and can be passed down through the generations. So these are, you heard them talk about pearls of wisdom. That's a good example of that, of what wisdom is. They're like valuable pearls. Wisdom is also kind of a status symbol. The verse suggests that the children who listen to their parents' wisdom will be seen as successful and attractive. And you think about it. Kids who have good parents that bring them up right, and the kid turns out pretty good, they're going to be respected not only by their elders, but in a lot of ways they're going to be respected by their peers. And another thing when you talk about leadership, anytime that you get a group of people together, somebody is going to emerge as the leader. And if you have brought up your children, good morals, good character, things along that line, other people are going to see that, and probably that's the one that they're going to look to be the leader. Nobody wants to follow somebody who's a slime bag and a liar. They want somebody who has got good morals and things along that line. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. This is going to be an outward thing. It's going to be a status symbol that they're a good person, and people normally gravitate toward good people. Normally, now there's some people that if there was 10 people in the room, they'd pick the Caudill every time. But that goes kind of like we talked about in the video there. It doesn't always work, but the majority of the time it does.
The image that's in verse 9 also kind of gives you the impression of you listen to mom, you listen to dad, and you practice that wisdom, you're going to be a winner. Because what does it say? It says that you're going to have a garland to grace your head. The image of like the ancient Olympics in Greece, they would put a garland on their head, and then it says a chain to adorn you. That kind of gives you an idea.
Like the Olympic medal. Yeah.
So you're going to be a winner, and you're going to be someone who's accomplished.
Right.
You act upon these things.
Right. Wisdom is also a reflection of inner achievement. The verse suggests that the children who listen to their parents' wisdom will eventually have a reputation similar to someone wearing jewelry. Wisdom is a way to achieve eminence. The verse suggests that children who listen to their parents' wisdom will eventually achieve a distinguished position in society. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be the President of the United States or something like that, but they're going to be a respected member of the community. And you think about, I didn't grow up here in Cerrito, Canova, okay? But one of the things that I've noticed, pretty tight-knit community, and people's reputation were established when they were young. And they talk about, I remember old so-and-so, he was a troublemaker then, he's a troublemaker now. But then you look at the leaders, the people that we have in leadership positions in the town, They were leaders in high school. They were leaders when they were younger because of their moral character and things along that line. So we will stop right there and pick up next week with the next verse. Appreciate everybody's attention and comments today.